Hey, welcome back to Trek on the Tube. It's time for another Star Trek review and Easter eggs video. Today, we're talking about Star Trek Prodigy Season 1, Episode 6, Kobayashi. Do beware because as usual, this review will contain a lot of spoilers, although it was admittedly pretty hard to dodge the big reveals this time around. I think the internet went a bit crazy over this one, but that was weeks ago now. Yes, I'm a bit late to the party. Anyway, let's get down to it. Let's get real. Honestly, the fan response to this episode was overwhelmingly positive. So many people loved it, and a great number of them even have gone as far as saying that this is the best episode of the season. Some are even claiming that this is the outing that finally sold them on the show, which is something I find kinda sad and even potentially dangerous for the future of the franchise, but I mean that's a whole other discussion, which we can have, and I can further explain in another video down the line if you want, but that's not the point here today. For now, let's get back to Kobayashi. As I was saying, the fan response was so great that even with all my spoiler dodging leading up to the moment I could finally sit down to watch it, I couldn't really avoid seeing the praise itself. So, you can imagine my surprise and confusion when I eventually finished the episode and just sat there thinking, that was okay. I then went to Twitter to post my first reaction, my initial thoughts, my non-spoiler little reaction video, and again, I still didn't really know how to feel or how I was feeling. My immediate emotion was not one of great joy or excitement like seemingly the rest of the fandom, but it wasn't frustration, sadness, or disappointment either. It really was just confusion. So I watched it again, and again. And again, because this is what I do with all of these Star Trek episodes. Sometimes I rewatch them just to go Easter egg hunting. Sometimes I rewatch them to kind of, I guess, analyze their rewatchability. The rewatch value that they have. And just like for this episode, I rewatched it because, I don't know, sometimes my initial assessment isn't precise or isn't clear enough, and I don't have enough thoughts collected to be able to actually make a video. But here we are, I have had time to reflect, and I think I can finally express my thoughts in a clear way, so here we go. The first big thing I want to talk about is the ending. We learn that Chikote was the original, or at the very least, one of the previous captains of the Protostar, and that Hollow Janeway was working with / for him at the time. Also, we learn that deep inside the computer can be found information about the ship's mission, origin, and possibly past or future. And honestly, even if those final scenes were only very short and compared to the whole rest of the episode, they were wonderful. Not only am I desperately happy to see Chikote return, God knows his character didn't get nearly enough screen time or development in Voyager, so giving him the opportunity here will be amazing. Not only that, but also, as Wife on the Two pointed out a few months ago, maybe they're gonna try and get Native American representation right this time around and kind of redeem that aspect of Chikote's character. But I'm also very excited to see the season's plot move forward. A big complaint I have with Discovery and its overarching plots is the mysteries take too long to unravel. I mean, it ultimately gets boring, straining. Also, there's a risk in building up a mystery for too long. The risk being that at the end of it all, it leads to an eventual disappointment. I mean, the longer the build-up is, the bigger the payoff needs to be. But here, between the flashbacks and the information revealing itself from the Protostar, I'm actually very hyped. The mystery and the progressive reveals are paced very well. Not only just in this episode, but throughout the season entirely, I find. So, yeah, I'm very interested to see where all of this is going. Those final moments with Chikote's appearance, it was a massive win for me on every level. And while we're on the subject of reveals, the second thing worth talking about are the flashbacks to Gwyn's, I guess, creation. I don't know whether or not she's a clone of some kind or simply spawned from the Diviner's genetic material as indeed a child would be. I don't know. I don't know what the details are. Details aside though, again, I think this development or rather reveal, added value to the mystery of the Diviner and his progeny, especially considering a pretty big deal was made about them being the last of their species. So maybe that extinction plotline is gonna play into the story somehow. People are already theory crafting that the Diviner is trying to use the protostar to time travel to the past somehow to save his species, a la Anorax. Anyways, I love that. That was great. And before we move on to the whole holodeck subplot, which I know is the thing everyone talked about the most, there's one very last small detail of great value, in my opinion, that we need to talk about. I'm thinking of the very subtle smile Gwyn gives Dal when she understands, or rather realizes, she wasn't left behind thanks to some sort of protocol or Janeway pressuring them into doing so. No, it was a choice that Dal made. I think that unspoken line was heartwarming and very important for both the characters' growths. So as you can tell, I did actually enjoy the episode. I enjoyed it, admittedly, quite a lot the first time around. I was just kind of taken by surprise, I guess, by the whole holodeck and the returning characters. We're gonna address that in a bit. But I think that all of that, as cool as it was, kind of took away from, I guess, some of the wins that this episode had on its own. This episode accomplished things by itself. It didn't necessarily need all of that. And though now that I have time to reflect on it, I can kind of see the returning characters as like an added bonus to the solid episode that this is. At the time, it just kind of felt like it was undercutting the importance of these little moments like Dal and Gwyn's relationship growing. I do think that the strongest win for all of the holodeck simulation was Dal's growth and Dal's change. Because, you know, he had his whole Boimler moment there where he had to finish the simulation at all costs. He absolutely wanted to succeed, not only to prove to the crew, but also to prove to himself that he had what it takes to become captain. That was very wholesome. But here's the thing. Without all of that, I guess the whole thing felt like it was a little, I guess a little unwarranted. Like, those scenes wouldn't have added to the show or given the audience much without Dal's growth. Now, I promise you, I'm not trying to disguise my critiques and my backhanded comments at the way that they use these legacy characters of Star Trek as some kind of praise for Dal's growth. No, I think these two things are very separate. Alright, now that's enough with the slight complaints, I guess, about the somewhat unnecessary nature of what they did, because, on the flip side, it was actually pretty goddamn amazing to see characters from so many different eras of Star Trek come together, especially in a way that felt so organic. Because from a story perspective, it made sense. Scratch that, it didn't just make sense, it was brilliantly conceived. Having these characters be part of a holographic training program that presents and explains who these people are worked not only for Dal and Jankum in-universe, but also for future generations of Trekkies that will one day explore the other shows and watch the stories in which these amazing people take part. So yeah, I guess all I'm trying to say is, as much as I enjoy having these moments in modern Star Trek, as much as I admire the way it was stitched together, these moments are not what sell me on the new shows or showcase their true potential or quality. As much as I do love seeing Odo and the others back on screen, I get more out of the new characters and new concepts we get to witness. Now, I know this review is maybe starting to get a little long for only a 20-minute episode, but I still do have some technical aspects to talk about, and also Baby on the Tube's reaction. I do just kind of want to finish on this, and I'm sorry for being a little all over the place. It was admittedly hard to collect my thoughts, because I'm very divided. You know, I love seeing legacy characters come back on screen. I love seeing the Enterprise D bridge. I love all of these things because to me it doesn't feel so much like fan service as it feels like lore expansion. It feels like the universe building itself. and it makes sense to me. And it's very well conceived that these legendary people, or people that of note, I guess, in Federation and Starfleet history, are now part of training programs. You know, they're there, and they can help the younger generations of Starfleet cadets grow and expand and become better captains. It makes complete sense. It's just that, yeah, that's it. That's the small thing. I think that there needs to be a balance so that it doesn't overpower the wins that the new shows accomplish on their own. Technical aspects. The animation is still pretty good, with the art style and execution of the landscapes being the clear standout. Close-ups, be it on objects or characters, don't seem to work as well, or at least not all the time. I guess not all textures are rendered equal. Performance-wise, everyone did a great job, including Gates McFadden, whom I didn't even believe had come in to deliver new lines at first. That's how good her performance was. I legit thought they had jacked lines from previous episodes like they did with all the other characters, because her voice was that on point. And of course, the biggest props from this episode goes to, well, the writer. Because I'll tell you what, not only did he manage to craft a dream come true, create your own crew game, come to life, gift for the fandom, but he also managed to actually write an episode that moved the overarching plot forward, all the while building backstory and personality for our main characters. And then there are those jacked lines. Now, I'm not saying some of the audio wasn't a little janky, and obviously of varying qualities, but finding the right lines for the right characters to fit the narrative of the story without having those lines feel out of place is a feat in and of itself. I can't even begin to imagine the work and research that went into it. Regardless of how each and every one of us feels about bringing back old characters and doing this kind of stuff in Star Trek, you cannot deny that this kind of thing is a love letter to the franchise. It's creatives that love Star Trek and that are just putting in so much work to bring the Star Trek that they fell in love with into the Star Trek that they love creating. And I mean, it was very well written. Come on. I mean, big double thumbs up. Big double thumbs up from my end. Before we finish, I'd like to drop the very short line about Baby on the Tube's reaction. She wasn't really invested in this one. Even if the episode did manage to juggle being for kids and adults all at once, it admittedly didn't have that much going for it when it comes to a 3-year-old. She did sit through it though, but fidgeting with a toy in her hand for the most part. So yeah, she wasn't the most engaged. Of course, that's probably just because she's very young. And that concludes the review part of the video. Overall, a fun episode that I do think will go down as a very memorable one for many, if not the most memorable episode of Prodigy. Alright, Easter eggs and references. This is something known as the game. It was first seen in The Next Generation and later in Lower Decks. In The Next Generation, it was actually an addictive weapon used as part of an elaborate ploy to take over the Federation. One can assume that the one seen in Lower Decks was as well, because it was meant to be like a collector's item. So I'm assuming the prize would be to have an original. This one, I think, is simply an inoffensive replica or different version. Of the places and programs shown or mentioned are Andoria 4, probably a reference to Andor, the moon homeworld to the Andorians, though I don't think we've ever heard of Andoria 4 before. Ceti Alpha 5, which is first seen in the original series and later in The Wrath of Khan. We then see Vulcan, or at the very least a recreation of a Vulcan set that we once saw in the original series. The combat featured is the Caliphie. Jane Eyre gets a shout out, you may have heard of it before. It's a novel written by one Charlotte Bronte. Janeway used to play a holoprogram in that style. We also get brief mentions of Deadwood, South Dakota, and Paxal Resort, which are respectively a western scene in The Next Generation and a sort of tropical island thing from Voyager that Neelix created. During this sequence, we are shown all kinds of different Starfleet badges from varying uniforms and times, but not just. We also get badges from alternate timelines and alternate universes, and even badges that weren't ever badges, simply logos used as promotional art for Star Trek itself. So, yeah. I guess when it comes to the alternate timeline badges, one could conclude there was some kind of recording or documentation made off screen. But the promo art, I don't know. I just don't know. To tell you the truth, there was a time I would have gotten all worked up about this, but at this point, where we are with continuity errors within the franchise, I'm really just worn out. So I won't make a fuss. Just know that my official stance on this is... God damn it. Why? Anyway, this is what I think is a next generation style Klingon bridge, and this is the Kobayashi Maru, as seen before in previous iterations of the franchise. And finally, Dao, when he says revenge is a dish best served cold, it's probably a reference to the Klingon proverb once quoted by Khan, and his fire everything line was pretty much a carbon copy of Nero's line in Star Trek 09. Fire everything! And there you have it, the review, the toddler's reaction, the Easter eggs and references. I thank you so much for your patience. I know these videos aren't coming out on a weekly basis. I'm doing my best. Like, comment, share, subscribe, do all of those fantastic things. A big shout out to all the channel patrons. And as usual, live long and prosper.